afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the high-speed rail 1 year later. I think we have a very fortuitous day to assess where we've been, where we've come, given Vice President Biden's announcement this morning in Philadelphia. And since Karen has to get back to her office, and I should invite the rest of the panel to please come up, Ross and Rick, please join us. But since Karen's under a time crunch and she only has about 10 minutes left with us, I just want to turn it right over to her. Karen Ray is the Deputy Administrator of the FRA, and I can say she's the hardest working woman in the rail business. Not the hardest woman, because I constantly hear from her over the weekend and during the Super Bowl. So I know she's really doing her best to implement this ambitious vision. Karen?
Thank you, Petra. Well, how exciting it is to run up to Philadelphia, join Secretary LaHood and Vice President Biden in the initial beginning of the rollouts of our budget that you'll see early next week. I did bring copies of the press release that was put out today. I'm sure that Andy probably already has got them. Dan Buckley in the back of the room has several of them. They are available on the Vice President's website. But I want to talk about a few of the things that are in here, and I also wanted to leave you with a few messages. I know you're going up on the Hill. This event came around quickly, so I'll apologize for not being here, but whenever there's this good news, we found a way to move things around. The Vice President and Secretary LaHood reinforced the goal that the President talked about in his State of the Union, which is a comprehensive plan to reach 80% of Americans' population in 25 years with a high-speed rail network. I want to reinforce the word network doesn't come across, but to those of you in this room that understand it, not every part of any of the systems in Europe or in Japan or China are any just high-speed rail. It's how you create a network that really reaches the large populations. And that he announced that we are dedicating in our proposal, and I won't be able to answer too many questions about the numbers quite yet, but we will be dedicating $53 billion over the next 6 years to continue construction of a national high-speed and intercity rail network. Thank you to all of you for your support in helping getting us to get here. We heard from many manufacturers and many folks in the industry that until we mainstreamed this program and began to think of it on an annual basis, but also in our authorization, we were going to be unable to gather the critical mass we needed to make this program a success. And I think today's speech clearly signals that that's the intention of the administration. We also talked about successes we have in the United States, and I have to talk about this one because I worked on the Keystone Corridor when it went back up to a mere 110 miles an hour. By the way, that's not kilometers per hour. And literally, they've seen a 57% increase in ridership because it is now faster than driving and taking a plane between Harrisburg and Philly and on up into New York City. There are key places in this whole tough budget environment we can't sacrifice, and the one you heard the President talk about over and over again includes out-educating, and we can't let the rest of the world outbuild us. This is the time we're going to be focused on rebuilding America and doing it in the most difficult of times, but as we stood in 30th Street Station, we remembered when that building was built. The first step in this 6-year plan will be the $8 billion that will be announced, the detail of which will be announced in our budget proposal on Monday from the President. It does include core express service, those services that are 125 to 250 miles an hour or higher. I always have to say this, I did just come in at the end of the last speaker. The TGV in France runs with 28% of their passenger miles on the true high-speed rail network. The rest is fed in on regional and other routes into the system. The system works phenomenally well, but it's because it's a network. So I want to reinforce that. We also have regional routes that will upgrade to 90 and 125. And we have emerging systems around the country that are somewhere more like our commuter rail lines at 90 miles an hour. As many of you know, there was a long-term there was a commitment of $10.5 billion in the last 2 years by President Obama and Congress. We have moved quickly to try to get those dollars out. We have over half of them out, and we will exceed the statutory requirement. We'll have the money out and obligated over a year before the law called for us to do that. Private dollars are also gravitating towards these, whether they're small investments in Maine or whether they're large ones that we expect to see in Florida and California. We will continue to improve and increase our push on Buy America and the domestic manufacturing agenda. At this time, we are really standing on the threshold. I actually was back in the office and my staff had pulled out some things from the early days of the interstate highway system. And I was going to bring them, but I really needed to get my head around what the Vice President just said today. But they talk about the struggles of people saying, why are you doing this? Why are you making this investment? How can you pay this much for these things called roads? The farm to market system works just fine. What's wrong with all of you folks? And this was some of the feedback Eisenhower got before he actually instituted the National Defense Highway System that then led the U.S. forward in that area. So I know you're going up on the Hill, and I know you're going to talk to a lot of people. I want to take just 5 more minutes here and talk to you about the myths that are most disturbing and give you some facts that I'd like you to consider taking up. This idea of 80% of Americans being reached in the next 25 years is aggressive. It's immensely aggressive. Half the time is the National Interstate Highway System. But with our mega regions clearly defined across this country and the huge populations that are in those mega regions, we believe that, in fact, there are absolutely reasons that we need to do this. Let me give you some examples. Metropolitan regions that would be served in California's proposed high-speed rail system contain over 31 million people. 2.3 times as many people are as connected in Madrid by the high-speed rail service in Spain. So remember, the United States is much more like the European Union than it is like any one nation in Europe. A rail system centered in Chicago and the Midwest would serve roughly the same number of people, 27 million people. Currently, the French system centered in Paris. A lot of parallels. The metropolitan area served by the Northeast Corridor, 41 million people, are nearly as populous and dense as Spain and France combined. So as you look around and people say this isn't going to work in the United States, let's look at actual facts. Let's not just use the rhetoric. They said that we didn't use the money wisely, that we spread it over. We did have money to 36 states. Most of that went for planning grants and to help states understand how to move forward. Of the 9.3 money that was originally put out in 2009, $8 billion of that went to 6 corridors in the United States to begin significant improvement in higher and very high-speed rail corridors. Those were down payment, and until we begin to really do this investment that Vice President Biden talked about today, they were just the very beginning of a down payment. Now we're talking about a real program. The other thing I want to talk about is we are doing public-private partnerships. Some of our railroads, because we have such a sophisticated freight rail system, will be the obvious corridors for some of the passenger rail lines. Other ones, we want brand new high dedicated lines, whether it's Nevada, California, or Florida. There will be others. The Northeast Corridor has a very visionary plan that's going to be moving ahead. So it's all types, it has to be market driven, and it has to be supported at the local level. We continue to be excited about the manufacturers that have come forward, all of them that are working with us. The Vice President pointed out we're not only going to improve manufacturing here and rebuild something that we've lost, and in fact much of our early intelligence ended up finding its way into Europe, China, and Japan. We were the originators here in the US of a lot of that information. But also the construction, the on-the-jobs. We talk about trains all the time, but 90% of the costs are on-the-job construction costs, and we need to realize that's real jobs here at home. I know FRA's move has been slow. We've probably added about 60% to our staff that's charged with this program. We're seeing some real movement. We believe that unlike the highway system that in 1919 got their first program and didn't get a dollar out for 3 years, that we are moving down the path, but we have to have good agreements. We have to plan well. We got one shot to do this right, folks, and finding the balance of expediting and the urgency and at the same time moving forward is key. I've talked about FRA already getting their money out. I will try to get back and share a little bit more information. I'll work with Andy. This has been a whirlwind day for us for the last few days. But I want to reinforce something, and this is something that you see. I constantly hear that, wait a minute, this is FRA's decision. Every decision that has been made has been driven by states putting in applications. This is a state-federal program, much like our highway program. Our transit agencies apply for discretionary funds for much of what they do with their New Starts rail systems. This is a state-federal partnership, and we intend to build on that in the future. That includes our partnership with Amtrak, but especially our partnership with the states. So until we can let the states get geared up and build their capacity, we will continue to move forward a little more slowly than we like, but I would suggest to you at rocket speed, if you want to compare us to any of the models around the world that took 10 to 15 years to get where we've gotten in the last 2. We look forward to sharing in the next week and maybe the next couple of months much more about the plan. There is a plan. We are working on it and have been working on it, and timing is everything. But today, I'm mostly glad to just be here for a few minutes to share with you the excitement of what I consider the second most major step in high-speed rail's future here in America, which was the Vice President's announcement today. The first one you have to give to the President for beginning this whole initiative. So I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to stay a little longer. I think, though, because my bosses are waiting, because we've had a little busy day today, I'm going to sneak out and arrange with Andy to come back and maybe answer a few questions a little later in the week, in the next couple of days. So thank you for your support, and to Andy and Tom for all their patience as we tried to work through your schedule today. And they even asked me, well, why didn't they check with us? This is our conference. I said, they don't check with us. So I'm glad to see you all here, and I really encourage you. It's smart people like you that understand the value of this that will help that message get forward and that agenda move forward. So thank you very much, and I apologize for a speech that was totally rewritten on the train coming back from Philadelphia. Thank you.
Karen, I want to say thank you so much for your hard work. We're slugging and working with you. And let's thank Karen Ray one more time. She's been really working hard at this program. Thank you so much.